If you are any kind of deep tech founder, if you're an early stage deep tech investor, this is a required episode. You need to know about Newlab. It's one of the most special things in the entire deep tech ecosystem. Scott Cohen is one of the co-founders, along with David Belt of Newlab. They built this thing over the last decade or so in the Navy Yard in Brooklyn as a part civic project. This is a place where hundreds of startups that are doing very difficult, very ambitious deep tech projects have gotten their start. It's a community that's helped each other out. Scott is one of the most soulful guys I know. And he's just trying to help create an environment where these things can thrive. And I'm so proud of him and what he's done. I think more people need to know about Newlab. It's one of my favorite things whenever one of our companies gets involved at Newlab. When you decide that you want to leave your job and go work in a deep tech startup, you should just check out the menu at Newlab. There's so much we talk about. By the end, you will really understand Newlab. You'll believe in them, what they're doing. You'll want to be a part of it. Towards the end, we also talk about the coolest, newest thing that Deep Future is working on.
I've never met anyone like it.
He could hack anybody's phone in a matter of minutes. Who is that guy? Who can do that?
Thomas is the most interesting man in the world.
He's one of my favorite people on the planet.
Inventor.
Wicked smart.
The master of cutting corners. If you had a dead body in your trunk, who would you call?
He would get arrested immediately in a lineup.
I stood in line to get his autograph.
You know, his mouth can barely keep up to his brain.
I don't actually know what Pablos does.
A hacker magician.
Man of the future. 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 Future.
You guys have built something really unique and extraordinary with Newlab, so I really want to try and pick your brain about that because there's a lot I don't know. And I think it's just very important and timely because I feel like we're really at this inflection point with deep tech where we get to do these things now. And you guys got a head start on that. And I think that you've gotten to see a bunch of companies come and go through there. And so it'd be great to pick your brain about what you've observed with them working and not working. And then let's talk about what you think is possible and want to do. That would be awesome. And for people who listen, it's an audience of mostly nerds and entrepreneurs, people who are interested in science and tech stuff, a lot of founders and executives and that kind of thing. So they're people who should know about you. And yeah, so I think I'm really excited about spreading the word a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what's really incredibly moving about New Climate Futures a few days ago, which is our annual event, which we had on, I don't know what day today is. Today's Saturday.
Saturday, and the event was what, Thursday or something?
The event was Thursday. Is just to show up there and see 70 companies showcasing where they are in their journey of inventing something new that is a piece of a larger puzzle that we're all part of, and seeing them all there together, and then seeing, I think 2,000 people came. There was 1,000 people that couldn't come because we just needed to restrict it. But in the early days of Newlab, it was a New York thing.
Okay.
And it was like just culturally, like everyone wanted to come, and it was a bit of a petting zoo kind of thing, like kind of come see new technologies, but it was very New York. But it's moved, and of course there were New York people that came, but it was really a deep tech community from around the world who I guess really appreciate what Newlab has become for that community. And I think David and I, in many ways, our naivete and our kind of the fact that we're not engineers, we're not scientists, but we are civically really motivated.
Yeah.
I think it's both surprising and maybe somewhat obvious that it would be people like us that would create something like Newlab, but the thing is we really love it. And we love creating a sense of place.
Yeah.
And we also have always said from the very beginning, this is not a top-down thing, it's a bottom-up. And it's only as rich and as exceptional as the people that are part of the community. And so I think it's really the credit of the team members, the people that are meeting the companies. There's a handful of companies there that I met, but there's like a lot of companies that are touching and leveraging and benefiting from Newlab that I've never met. And then there's a whole young new pipeline team of people who are engineers and scientists and people obsessed with energy transition and new material science that are part of our core team that are meeting founders and vetting them. And I think there's been a shift over the years of Newlab being a bit of a Noah's Ark for technology, where I think in recent years, we've really shifted to really focus on specific themes. These days, primarily energy, materials, and materials broadly can be interpreted as waste streams or life sciences applied to the future of new molecules, new materials, new ways of making things that maybe were made in a more extractive way from natural resources, and looking at alternative ways to do that, or looking at waste streams of countries or industries and understanding what is the relevance of that waste stream to this very finite world we live in. And
well, that gives us about 6 or 8 hours of stuff to talk
I know,
about.
but I think...
Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
first, I think Noah's Ark is a great way of describing it in my mind, maybe for different reasons, because what I see is this alternate future we could be in if the tech industry had done all these kinds of things for the last 25 instead of just doing software. And there's a kind of, really is a Noah's Ark in a way, because you guys did pick up these things that were not popular, not the mainstream technology thing. And I think we're at a turning point now where we finally get to really do these things at large scale. And that's probably partly what you're witnessing by saying now it's a deep tech community, not just a art project for New York. And that's so cool because, and I'm seeing that too. This week I was in a couple of rooms with like hundreds of nuclear reactor nerds, which I am trying to attract people interested in nuclear reactors for the last 17 years, and I've never had that many in one room. And I wasn't even on stage. It was like other people doing stuff. It's so exciting. Feels like an amazing moment in time. But with Newlab, because you guys, are self-described, civically minded, trying to create a community and those things, I think that's what makes me so interested in it, because it's arguable that I'm not like that. And most people who are interested in technology and deep tech and science and engineering wouldn't probably describe themselves that way. They're the people who got on a different track. And it hurts us a lot in technology because there's so much you can't do when you don't have a community and you don't have the kinds of people who work on that and care about it and foster it and make it happen. And by extension, all the other kinds of people who are good at the things that we suck at. And me, like the origin of Newlab with you guys and your perspective is part of what makes it so important. Because looking back at the successes that Silicon Valley does have, it's because of the community. It's because you can go there and be surrounded by people who will give you the benefit of the doubt for a crazy idea, try to help out, try to connect you, try to support you, and you can just get way further faster. And so part of what I'm trying to figure out from a grand scale going forward is like, how do we help everybody in the world realize that, no, we need you for deep tech too. It's not just the nuclear physicists that we need. That's only like 1%. 99% is like all the other people. Somebody has to fucking bake cookies. Like there has to be somebody to do everything. Yeah. And so I want everybody, regardless of their skill set and background and interests, realize like we need them too. And it seems like you guys have really done a good job of that.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a straight line, but I think we have really discovered that operating model of Newlab is to actually sit between some very different stakeholders and help them work together. And the DNA of Newlab has always been, we worked with the public sector to bring it into being, but we also attracted really great founders looking into the abyss of things that were really complex and needed a landing pad and more time to get through it.
Yeah.
And then the thing that we learned, and we really did learn this, was that leaders of industry that are our peers going into these, I would call the infrastructure of the world, would come to Newlab and say, how do I get people like this thinking about my challenges? And so our core methodology, what Newlab does is actually we sit between these three stakeholders and as a venture platform that is really focused on, I think we fundamentally believe in science, and we believe in people who are obsessed with science and technology that want to apply it to challenges that the world's facing. And we also believe that markets are a measure of what's actually going to work and be successful or not. And then government plays a role in making those markets work. And right now, what we're thinking a lot about is, okay, how do we look thematically at the world, energy, materials, urban infrastructure, mobility, and then how do we look at the geography of the world and bring our playbook into different geographies where we can build the ecosystem. So like we have a very strong ecosystem growing in New York, in Detroit around mobility in partnership with the state of Michigan and city of Detroit, and of course Bill Ford and the Michigan Central effort. And we have a team in South America that's growing, doing work down there in mining and in pulp and paper and things like that. And now we're really making a big commitment to Middle East, North Africa, and building a center of gravity initially in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And it's really, I really also am grateful for the kinds of partners we're finding in the government level that are really thinking that the post-fossil fuel world, these people we're working with are really thinking that the only way to realize a post-fossil fuel world is to partner with founders and inventors and entrepreneurs who are trying to push these new technologies into the mainstream of the industrial kind of infrastructure of the world. And also Reimagining. I loved what Ginger, the founder of BioMason, have you ever talked with her?
No.
She's amazing.
What is it?
BioMason, she basically studied the way shells were formed, the way coral reefs forms, and the role bacteria plays in that.
Okay.
And built a concrete company called BioMason.
Yeah.
Based on those fundamental principles that's scaling now. It's actually, they're building their first, I think they raised about $100 million. They're building their first plant now. And
to make concrete out of, to grow concrete.
Yeah, and as a
in
biological
place,
process.
or do you just grow it and turn it into
you
a
could grow
mix?
it in place. You could spray the bacteria mixture onto a dirt area in the desert and grow a concrete runway. If
I
you
can't
wanted
just
to.
grow a skyscraper or a parking garage.
I think people are thinking in that direction. But I heard her speak the other day, and she said everything in the world is either grown or mined.
Yeah.
And I also listened to a Grow Everything podcast the other day, and they were talking about just growing different types of drugs that are dependent on really scarce or resources in politically challenged areas of the world, like poppies and things like that. So I just think we're at a moment.
For sure.
We're at a moment, and the moment is what I felt at New Climate Futures was just like an immense sense of optimism about where we're at, and at the same time, we're at a precipice of some really difficult things environmentally and culturally and socially because of the impact of media. And so I think the way the team at Newlab is really thinking now, and I support, and I'm involved as a catalyst and a rainmaker for this, is stepping back, looking at what we've become and our methodology and how it's having impact and how we can actually be this machine to help move founders forward, unblock obstacles our founders are facing through our network and our relationships, and continue to foster this environment where it's not a quid pro quo place. It's a place that just help everybody, help the person next to you, and collaborate.
How much is that? Maybe it changes over time, but like how much of the cross-pollination do you see happening in
a lot? And actually, from the very beginning, when I met you, early days, before we even opened the large facility, and we would go to places like MIT and Rensselaer Polytechnic and learn from the leaders of those different departments what was coming. That was really the defining principles of Newlab, came from talking to the leaders of different engineering departments of universities. And trying to understand what type of community we were looking for that we could support coming out of.
Where does their job end, and what needs to?
Like what's the next step when you're trying to build a company? And it's not quite like a software company, at least not back then. You need tools and you need other types of engineers, you need more time. And so we tried to use the public dollars we raised in the very beginning to create that infrastructure with labs and shops and resources, and then to use our network and our relationship with government to help
And was in the beginning, was it mostly the city or the state helping finance it, or what happened?
Yeah, we raised private dollars, but we
Okay.
also went to the city, to the EDC under the Bloomberg administration, and to the state, and really basically made the appeal together with the Partnership Fund for New York City that this isn't going to work with just private dollars. Like, we need support, and we'll do it.
Yeah.
And we don't even know exactly what the future business model is, but we didn't want to be predatory. We didn't want to be venture at the beginning.
Okay.
And we still are not predatory. We're very inclusive, open. We invite other investors who have the intellect about different industries to collaborate with us, and we do channel capital to opportunities, both government and private and patient capital, investment capital.
Yeah.
But we've always wanted to be like a place where people felt safe. And the point I was going to make was the biggest concern when we opened Newlab among a lot of people from other institutions was, how do you protect IP?
Mm-hmm.
And we really just felt instinctually like that should not be where we should start. It should be a place where when you sign an agreement to come into Newlab as a member, you acknowledge that everyone has IP that's important to them.
Right.
That you have your IP, they have theirs, you respect theirs. And if you have something super, super sensitive, take your own measures to cover it. But we've just never had an issue around any IP. I can remember a couple of issues, but we actually mediated it, and it was fine. And generally, you do see a lot of companies there that are using other companies' technology.
Great.
And people forming new companies with each other. And you
So
see,
is there so if you go to somewhere like you went to Detroit, having accomplished what you did in New York, can you tell them, hey, put public money in at the beginning, or some private and public money in at the beginning? It's going to take us this long, but we know we can get to some kind of like cash flow break even or self-sustaining modality, or is that possible yet, or in view, or how far along have you gotten with making this thing sustain itself? Is there a business model, or is it just...
Yeah, I think that it's a venture platform. So the opportunity for Newlab's investors in the long run, and for the Newlab employees, who I consider partners and investors, is to have a stake in companies. And I think we've been very slow to go into that strategy, but we do have probably 75, 80 investments in companies. We support companies. We've grown companies from the ground up. We have probably 5 or 6 that we've grown from the ground up. That we are really careful to make sure that the founders own the cap table. We have a small piece of, not some sort of predatory thing. And then we have a revenue piece of our business that is growing quite a bit, and it's important. And that revenue piece of our business is where we partner with government and industry to realize very specific milestones. And with government, it's generally about around ecosystem building. With government, it's generally around ecosystem building, around specific themes that are important to Detroit. It could be mobility in Detroit. It could be the future of mining, and not the mining we remember it, but like literally, what is the future of mining? Through the lens of the Saudi government, who are thinking, we're looking at the other side of the fossil fuel world. We've never paid attention to our mineral resources. And we should, because it's part of a post-fossil fuel world. But we don't want to call in the old legacy mining people. We want to think of it differently. So what should we do? Is it biomining? And so we're setting up an entire strategy for the Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources in Saudi Arabia to attract founders to actually help the country learn what they should be doing and to do it. And the way we're thinking about things is we will continue to get governments to partner with governments. We'll continue to partner with governments to do the ecosystem building. We'll invite industry in to help fund defining very specific challenges that they understand well because they're in that industry, and then use those challenges to attract founders from around the world who are clearly already thinking about that stuff. So there's founders obsessed with all different pieces of the value chain. And we think our job is to actually help them pilot as quickly as possible with a partner that can become a customer or or some sort of a collaborator.
Mhm.
And the one business that we think is really critical for moving founders forward is the business of actually testing their technology in situ in the real world as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what Newlab has become quite excellent at mediating between founders and industry and government, which is an incredibly difficult piece of a founder's journey. And so that's business models fundamentally forming those partnerships, and there's obviously revenue there that can help keep this machine moving forward and growing it and growing value, and then deploying programmatic capital and investment capital from other investors into opportunities and hopefully sharing that upside long run. The real estate piece is like critical. Place is really critical to the building the ecosystem, and I think we have really strong conviction about that. If you go to Detroit, you go to our facility in Brooklyn, it's important to have a place and to feel a sense of belonging and to be part of it. And so I think
it's crazy. I think brains are wired for that. I started keeping track like almost a decade ago. When people ask me where I'm from and I say I'm from Alaska, they always ask me what part. Hardly anybody's ever been to Alaska. They don't know the difference between the parts, but their brain is trying to put me in a place. And I think that, like you said, I think it's wild, but like even like for Newlab, you have a place, people can close their eyes and picture being there because they've all been there, or at least all the people in the community. And even if they aren't there, they feel like they're part of that place. And that's like I totally agree with you. I think it's like a weird thing about I think part of the problem with remote work is that we hired a bunch of people who've never been to the place, where they never had any experience there. They never had a positive experience. So there's an office. I don't work there. I don't go there. There's people there. Maybe they don't feel like
it's not WeWork. It's not going to. I think this is really, I think, like, you should interview my partner David sometime. Because he's really, when I first met David, and he used to actually speak with a sense of melancholy about how there aren't places that are healthy to go be.
I know, it's crazy.
Drive through towns, and there are these shopping centers and stores, and it's all just the lighting's unhealthy, the sound's unhealthy, and
the vibe is just not cool. It's like it's either super commercialized, or it's like this park closes at 6 p.m., or it's not like you can just go hang out.
Yeah, and we talked about that for years.
Yeah, interesting.
And when he saw that building, he was invited by the Bloomberg administration. It looked like a Tarkovsky movie. It was all bombed. It was empty.
I remember seeing it.
It was a shell of a building.
You didn't know this, but I was there before you guys built anything, and I was there when you guys had like a few people in like a warehouse or whatever.
The beta space.
Yeah, the beta space. Yeah. I was there, and you could see like there was like a rendering of what you wanted to build, and then there was like this crater with some steel sticking out of it. Good luck with that, guys. But you made it happen.
Yeah, David made that happen.
Okay.
I think the way we divided was like basically David really had a vision for the space, and when he invited me out there the first time, we sat in the building and we're like, wow, something awesome could happen here.
Yeah.
And I really went and got obsessed about like learning about science and technology.
Right.
I've always been learning about science and learning what's coming. I think I talked to you even. I called you after I met you, and we talked about what's coming, and I started networking. And our goal was to basically find anyone and everyone that was working on deep tech and give them a sense that this was theirs.
Yeah.
And so that's why when we opened the larger facility, which is 85,000 square feet, we opened full because everyone was ready. And we got people from London and Turkey, and professors from Columbia University were starting companies, and Stephen Gorvan, who was running the Mars rover.
Oh, yeah.
From his bedroom in Brooklyn, and built parts of the Mars rover in Manhattan. So it was, I think, the early transmitter of Newlab is still what the transmitter is, which is founders. And I think that's...
So what do founders, if you think about it now from a founder's perspective, what should a founder know about Newlab or think about Newlab, or how do they know when to engage or figure out if it's even a place for them? How would you describe that?
I think if you're a founder, you should, and you've got something that you think is ready to test in the real world, in some form or fashion, then it's at least from a timing perspective, it's the right time to make sure that our pipeline team knows about you.
Yeah.
I think if you're too deep in the bench in the research side, it's probably not the right time to let our team know that you're ready, because we're really focused on helping to mediate the friction that exists when a company is ready to pilot. And then I think looking at the themes that we're focusing on and trying to understand which challenges we're focusing on in different parts of the world, whether it's waste streams in Puerto Rico or pulp and paper in South America, which a waste stream from the pulp and paper mill, or the future of mining, paying attention to the themes and then getting in contact. It's not a difficult place to get in contact with folks.
Yeah,
and
good.
It's not a difficult place to come and visit if you're in one of those areas. And they should call you.
Yeah.
And you can introduce them.
Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah.
Do you think you described, I guess, the major constituents? So you got your civic side, government's industrial side, and founder. And if I think of those as the meat and potatoes, what are the other ingredients in this recipe that are really important for making I get the facility is one, but what about, who are the people? What is the community? What does it take to make it as far as the people? Had that one, I feel like I've had a lot of experiences in my life of different quality. Some were amazing, some were like really not living up to their potential because I think I wasn't, me or whoever was involved wasn't enlightened about what those ingredients need to be. And so we didn't get the culture right, we didn't get the community right. Other times it was amazing and I probably didn't understand that somebody was making that possible. So in your mind, what are the things that, like, if you were going to go build a new lab in a new place, like you did in Detroit, did you have a top 10 list of like, we can't do it unless we have, a den mother and a chef, or like, what are the ingredients, what are the people that are needed to make it go? Do you have a sense of?
I'll take a stab at it. I think, first of all, you need people who care.
Okay.
Honestly, really do have empathy for the different stakeholders. It's not a trend.
Care about the other stakeholders.
Yeah, and I remember David used to say to all of us, these folks working in government, we have to have as much empathy for them as we do for the founders, because it's tough. They're like deep inside the machinery.
Yeah, they're trying to solve
the same problems. And they're trying to help solve the same problems, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
So I think you need people who have that ability. Of course, I think attracting people who have experience solving problems.
Yeah.
That they don't cower at problems. They just see them as that's what progress is, and that's what you need. Yeah, and I think that the more people that we attract that are not lost in the fuzziness, techno-optimism, or
the opposite,
just fantasize. There is a demographic of people who just want to be in climate or want to be in all these themes. And they're more language clouds for them.
Yeah, right.
They're not living it and breathing it. They want to get out of what they're in and be in it. And I think it can be very difficult to work with those folks, unless they're ready for some massive transformation, because the stuff is really hard.
I'll hang myself on this one. I think it's even worse than that. A lot of them are misanthropic. They had a bad experience with humans, so they want to save the planet and focus their attention on all these inanimate things and save the plants instead. And which, sympathetic, I get it, like humans can suck, but I think the right thing to do is make better humans and advance humanity, not to try and throw humanity under the bus to save the plants. And I think it's like they're not being honest about that. They're just using it as a way to be more and more critical of doing, and it's not constructive.
I had two thoughts that came to mind while you were talking. One was, I met this entrepreneur at New Climate Futures who's working on like a company called Mimic. It's like a solid state heat pump.
Yeah.
They developed this chipset that heats up really easily, and just stacks of them in this thing. And it's
Okay.
and I vaguely remember him, but he really remembered meeting David
Okay.
years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, this is many years ago. He was in Anna Dyson's studio at Newlab, and Anna Dyson was doing all kinds of really interesting work around the future of architecture and built environment stuff. I guess he was there, and he had this idea, and apparently he said, David used to look at it and call it the magic box, because it was like this magic box that's going to do this thing. And this is really years ago.
Okay.
And to see this guy show up at New Climate Futures with the magic box working,
Yeah.
and it really took him a long time.
Wow. Great.
And with some freaking awesome engineers around him that helped him realize his vision, which he couldn't have done until he met them.
Yeah. Right.
I
Wow.
mean, really, it's just such a
Wow. Great.
And these are like real. This is real gritty, hard
That
work.
it sounds really hard. I'm dubious. I want to see it now.
I want to show it to you. I want to show it, because I love showing you things that you're dubious about. But that was one thing. And the other thing, I was in Singapore last week.
Yeah. I was in Hong Kong last week.
You were?
I was going to go to Singapore. I didn't have time to do both.
And I was meeting with a lot of families that were interested in based assets like marine protected areas, mangroves. And these were families who want to support conservation and understand what that means.
Yeah.
But they also are families that are extracting from those natural resources. And we had such interesting discussions about what things need to be true for them not to turn their mangrove into a shrimp farm. And what type of factory is a mangrove? What is it doing? How do you break that down?
Yeah.
And then how do you create economic frameworks that incentivize them to perpetuate the factory of a mangrove, which is sequestering enormous amounts of carbon and building incredibly robust ecosystems, and that are there, versus a shrimp farm, which can be massively fruitful in the first 5 years because of the nutrients that come from that ecosystem, but then there's a cliff and they fall off and the resource is gone. So I think it's early days, but I think if and when carbon markets start to stabilize, I also think looking at nature-based assets as factories for things we're trying to achieve in the planet is really interesting.
There's a lot of those kinds of conversations, I think, that are possible now in a way weren't a generation or two ago. And I know people are impatient, but a lot of times it takes a generation. So now that these second and third kids are running the family office, possible. And that perspective too of just thinking, like you said, everything's either grown or mined. And you could say, like, even the grown stuff is mining. Like the plants are mining. That's what they're doing.
And minerals are coming from bacteria and ground. So there's not a lot of separation between it all.
Totally. It could get very circular about nature. But do you think there's it's interesting because you keep saying like years and years ago, but Newlab's like 8 years old. So like all of this has happened in 8 years, which is, it's extraordinary. And I'm sure it feels like lifetimes, but it's been 8 years. And you've gotten this far with thousands of people who've been touched or involved. You're in at least 2 or 3 or 4 places around the world now. It's a pretty large scale operation.
It's not. First of all, 8 years is a long time.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it's been more than 8 years. It's been with the beta space.
I see, right, because that was 8 years since you opened.
But for sure, since we have a larger facility.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You always think you should have gotten more done.
Yeah, I know.
You're behind. You should have done it a different way. But I think, and David and I are we're genuinely founders who are on the board. We're super involved in very specific things, but we also have a leadership team and people that are excellent at what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that I think Newlab is just getting started, actually. And I think we're interested in and very open to, what type of even partner in the world can help us fuel this thing in a way that's helpful for the planet and for the world. I don't think that we've very judiciously raised money, tried to focus on the 3 things we need to achieve this year, next year, and so we've moved it forward. But I do think there's an opportunity. Like Eric Schmidt's been out there a few times, and he's always been pretty gobsmacked by things he saw.
good. Can be helpful.
And yeah, for sure.
They're doing cool stuff too.
They're doing really cool things.
What about, if I ask the same question about founders, but for governments, if you're a government of a city or a state or a country, when should they call Newlab? How do they know that, oh, now is the time I should interface with Newlab? How would you frame that?
I don't really know exactly the answer, because I think the way our team is working is they're working around themes
Okay.
that are geographically, like in Louisiana, what infrastructure is in Louisiana that's relevant to decarbonization, where there's refineries and things like that. And so our team is working on in areas of the U.S., Detroit, mobility. There's a real reason to be there and focusing on the future mobility, not just mobility as we've always perceived it, but really what is the future mobility?
Yeah.
And the Middle East minerals and logistics.
Okay.
Is probably the second theme to come on board there. I'm building a studio.
But did
around
those themes
logistics.
come from those places, or did they come from you guys and then going and finding people interested in that?
So
theme?
both of those themes have existed within our mandate and our interests, but the Venn diagram overlays well with that geography. And so I think that's probably, there needs to be enough scale to the opportunity so that we can actually create a strong funnel and pipeline of founders, and there's enough government and industry commitment to really allocate the kind of capital that isn't expecting short-term returns, but realize that the downstream impact of investing in the ecosystem and investing in the riskiest stage of a founder's journey is going to attract investments, going to attract more founders. It's going to attract, by having pilot infrastructure for a particular type of challenge the world's facing, you're going to attract founders. And those founders are going to come there because there's a drone zone in Detroit, or because there's an opportunity to pilot around minerals in the Middle East, or logistics. And so I think for leaders of governments, of which we have people all the time, from ministers of industry and leaders of countries coming to Newlab and talking to our teams.
Industry or business perspective, the same question, like how do they know when to call you? It's like, we want help with this kind of thing, or we map to one of the themes you're already doing, or like, when's the time that you want to call from a Fortune 500 company? Or
I think that's becoming clear, which is a Fortune 500 or company or in a particular industry. It makes more sense for them to plug in and map to a geography where we've got the government support and infrastructure. And
so, for example, you're in Detroit now, so everybody, industry that's based there or has a focus there, should be checking in on you and seeing what they could do.
Yeah, see how you can plug into that ecosystem or bring a challenge into that framework, because I think it's become difficult for us to just focus on just a single industry problem. Outside of this, like building the funnel around a theme and a geography and pilot infrastructure makes
very important.
You get more economies of scale that way.
So have there been times when people brought something that was just too left field, not close enough to the center of gravity, that you thought you could be helpful?
All the time, all the time. And there's times where we do build like a process around a challenge that a particular industry has. But I think we believe the economies of scale come around building these ecosystems.
If you look like, I don't know, 20 years out or far enough out that you're done, or whatever, I don't know, whatever that means, would you want to see dozens of new labs or hundreds or thousands of them? Or do you want like Newlab to grow huge? Or do you think people should try to copy you in different areas and make things like Newlab? Or what do you think is the future of this? It's interesting. I think of it as a unique model. It's not a venture fund. It's not an accelerator exactly. It's an incubator, but also not the same thing. It's a new thing. It's kind of a new lab.
Yeah, it's a new lab. It's a venture platform.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good question. I think the team that are driving things right now really are thinking in terms we need. If you look at the planet, there's certain places we should be with a mothership. Because there's very specific challenges in that region of the world. And if we can be effective at bringing together stakeholders and reducing friction, we should do that. And then I think there's this kind of idea of outposts that are smaller versions that are really built around a very specific pilot infrastructure.
Right.
And maybe also relates to geographies. Is it near a port, or is it near refineries, or is it near a waste stream?
Okay.
And I think that's a really interesting lens that the team is thinking about. And I think the nice thing is somehow we haven't screwed up our brand. We actually have good values.
Amazing, yeah.
You know, that have been maintained. And it's a generous community. So I think the ambition now is to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And I think to the zeitgeist out there for the right kind of partner that can help us really grow this thing. And we're not sure what that looks like, but we're really open to a partnership with someone that can help scale it in the right way and serve the world in the right way.
What are the roles? Do you look for people who, somehow are like good at talking to nerds and scientists and politicians and executives? Is there some kind of archetype for the people who you think are the interstitial catalyst people in this mix, or how does that? It's not.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I've never worked anywhere, and I've never managed an organization. I'm like one of the foot soldiers.
Okay.
There. But
fair enough. All right.
So
Somebody.
I definitely think like our pipeline team are definitely people.
Yeah.
Who are like nerd out on technology and science, and have great relationships with founders, and they're doing pipeline for everything we're doing. Whether it's someone applying to come in to use one of our facilities, or coming through a challenge, just coming out of one of our studios, and whether it's in Uruguay or anywhere, that we have a pipeline team. So there's that demographic.
Yeah.
And then we have we have people that are working on the kind of the consultative aspect of this milestone-based work that happens to sit with stakeholders in industry and in government, understand a challenge, design around that challenge, set some what would be wins in solving some piece or all of the challenge, and then scouring the planet for founders, looking at those founders with the partners in the challenge, designing a pilot, making sure that the industry is ready to receive because like it's one thing if you have an idea of how to solve red mud,
right?
But if people in the aluminum industry aren't ready to help you pilot, you just show up there and you're like, okay, you're not going to achieve anything, because they're built for repetition and efficiency. They're not built. So you have to then design the conditions for a pilot to happen. And so like Newlab's involved in all that stuff. So there's that kind of person that, what do we call them? Design thinkers. It's a consultative kind of muscle. And then there's investment, people who have a good judgment and skills and empathy for the journey of the film.
What are some of the coolest things that have come through Newlab that you have seen over the years that you're like really thrilled about having had in the mix?
There's many. There's some that are like, one that comes to mind that I'm just super proud of watching how when Max Hout decided to start Launcher, when he's called up and he's looked, there's just no place else I could possibly build my rocket company than Newlab. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how are you going to? But he came into Newlab and started his childhood dream of building a rocket company.
Yeah.
And was using our shops to make parts. And I remember one day I bumped into him and he was telling me what he was about to do in terms of printing some parts out of, I think his aim was to print them out of, what are they printing in the there's another alloy, I forget what it's called. But anyway, I said, think it out. And I said, where are you going to do it? And he's told me, I've got a couple of different houses that I'm going to work with. And I'm like, you should really talk to this guy in Munich. From EOS. He's really one of the early pioneers of metal laser sintering, and he worked for Hans Langer, who started EOS. He was really the father of laser sintering.
Yeah.
And so I got them together on a conference call, and Max told him the direction he was going. He said, no, you don't want to go that direction. And it was like a really one of those moments where just being at the cafe and bumping into Max, having a conversation, really shaved an enormous amount of time off his journey.
Exactly.
And and then to see him 6-8 months later testing a rocket behind Newlab and watching all the different sequential tests. And now Max, the company, it became really, it was always clear that it was going to be very competitive and difficult to build these kind of like small sat launch vehicles, because you're either a company that's gotten too much funding and you're going to burn out too soon, or there's a lot of different reasons. But he was very careful and thoughtful. And now Max is CEO of Vast.
Okay.
It's building the future of space stations.
Great.
Vast bought launcher and the entire team. And I really love that, like, this journey of a founder who was fulfilling a childhood dream at Newlab is now building the future of commercial space stations.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to imagine, okay, how could we create Newlab activity on the space station that he's building? And so that's where I'm like,
People need something to do up there.
exactly. Yeah, you'll figure that out. And then I'm very proud of Amegy, who just launched their first ocean-going vessel.
Great.
That's converting ammonia to hydrogen, and I find that to be a remarkable milestone for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Just so many companies that are. I'll think of a few more. There's
That's
plenty.
fine. Fair enough. Man.
Are there any at Newlab that you've found to be super interesting?
I don't actually know how to navigate just having been over there at times. I don't really know what's happening. I need to figure.
Do you think that we should have every company that's associated with Newlab on some sort of website?
Yeah, you definitely should. And for a bunch of reasons. One is for a founder to be able to look at that list and go, oh, I know somebody at Amegy. I didn't know they were at Newlab. How'd they get there? What was it like? And then even for me, I would like to look at that and go, oh, they have people doing this kind of stuff. Let's send other companies that are, like you said, you have these themes. I don't know what the themes are. Like, if I can see the kinds of companies you have, then I can figure out who else should go. So I think that's a very useful thing to do. And then for me, it is embarrassing that I haven't figured it out or tried hard enough, because
you're like
I walk to Newlab. So like I literally should be there.
You also need to, I think I need to connect you with our pipeline team.
Yeah, I should meet some of those folks and get a sense of who to invoke when. That would be really useful. With or without me, it's an amazing thing, helping so many people. And I think it's interesting to me because I want to figure out how we rapidly scale up just doing deep tech in almost every industry. And it really has to start with, like you said, with these people who are inventors and engineers and have an idea, and it's very technical and hard, and so any support we can give them. Even our companies, we've invested in companies that are really out there on their own. And I think, good luck, guys. It looks really fucking hard, partly not just because of the thing they're working on is so hard, but because they're just isolated. They don't have a community. They don't have
that's the big issue. Being isolated is once you get into something like Newlab, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
You're really not alone, and you're like, you feel the inertia that you might feel when you're alone.
It's so...
It does solve a lot of that, and you can find people who can pull you through, or just find a resource you need. I can't tell you how many times I see a piece of equipment. It's like what you used to have at Intellectual Ventures. You go get a piece of equipment you need to do what you need to do. And I always find it super exciting when I see like a new piece of testing equipment at Newlab that someone absolutely needs, or somebody had it in their shop and they lend it to somebody else.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah, I feel like every deep tech company needs to be at Newlab.
So we got to grow more Newlabs. I kind of drew a blank on companies. There's so many. There's Jump Bikes. You remember those guys?
Jump Bikes was
the early day. Uber bought them.
Oh, it was like a line bike type thing, but early.
Social electric bike. Yeah, really early. Yeah.
Right.
It was like one of the early.
And they sold it to Uber. Yeah, the bikes has been like...
Uber killed it.
Such a telenovela, watching these bike and scooter rental companies come and go and scale and decline. Yeah. It's really weird.
I love Ryan Respecki from Jump, because he really had like strong conviction that we shouldn't have bike docks. And he had a very clear... He was a pioneer. And we actually didn't totally see it. He came to us a couple times early and wanted to be a member, and we were like, we had to choose.
Yeah.
And he called me one day and said, I really do need to be at Newlab.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, then come. And next thing he's like collaborating with one of the solar companies to put solar on the bike. He's in this, and he became this electric bike company. And then like we got the mayor's office to come ride his bike in the Navy Yard.
Okay.
And that was like, you can track for Amagi, for Jump,
Yeah.
for all these companies, you can track how the network of Newlab reduced their path to a major moment. And it's not, these are not linear things. They just are, they're organic network effects that happen sometimes because it's by design and what we want to try to help these companies do, but also there's just the serendipity, the engineered serendipity that Jobs always talked about.
You can't get serendipity on an island.
So for your founders who are isolated, and that's why I think for us going to Detroit, and even honestly, I'm telling you, first of all, it's so cool. The people we're working with, women and just all demographics.
The women are the key.
Are so smart.
Yeah. And smart, they're educated, and now they finally get to do something. It's exciting.
And genuine. The genuine nature of how we're working with people there is like incredibly exciting. But conversely, I'm hosting some innovators at an event for some big industrial families in mid-October in Riyadh.
Good.
And it has not been easy to find entrepreneurs there, and it's been hard for me to find people to feature. And ironically, the people that I did find were coming out of Cal State University, which is where they made a big investment in science and technology. And that's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that has infrastructure and focus areas. And so it's obvious why I'm finding them at Cal.
Yeah, for sure. It's been amazing for me going there and seeing what's possible, seeing the talent. I have some ideas about how to make things happen there.
I think you should work with us.
Yeah, we totally can.
On that.
I'll tell you my master plan.
Okay, and are there any founders that you've bumped into there that we should know about?
Yes.
Okay.
So look, this is exciting for me. I didn't do as good of a job as I always imagined I would of getting over to Newlab and interfacing and trying to be helpful.
But your family, you should be there as much as you can.
You make me feel like it. I just need to go put more time in there and really get up to speed on what's happening. There's probably ways you can really help some of those companies too. I'm trying to do an amateur job of some of the things you guys have really professionalized with our fund and trying to help our companies. And I really think we need to get some of our companies over there so they can thrive the way you guys can help them. The other thing I was going to ask you, I think is interesting, is if you weren't doing Newlab, it's such a weird thing that you ended up building this thing. If you weren't doing Newlab, what do you think you would do? There's no job, like you said, you never worked for anybody. There's no job for you.
I'm interested in communicating with people in media. I'm interested, like those two pieces over there against the wall are made from just carbon that came from. I don't think that's sequestered carbon, but I have some.
It's like
somewhere.
An art project.
Yeah, it's just I'm interested in like how do you.
That is sequestered carbon until you burn it.
Exactly. Yeah.
These are paintings.
Yeah.
And you made those.
I made that. Or I'm interested in making like public sculptures.
Yeah.
That communicate.
Okay.
To the world.
Yeah.
In a way that a talking head can't.
Right.
You know, something.
Okay.
Something, and I've been thinking a lot about forms can they store energy? Can they share energy? Can they communicate? Can they like almost like carbon totems for the carbon era?
Okay.
Things like that.
Wow.
So I've been thinking about stuff like that.
Have you met Justin Bryce?
No.
Oh man, you gotta meet this guy. He's a pretty renowned, I think, National Geographic photographer, and he's done some incredible environmental art projects with photography, but he's been doing sculpture lately, and he's got a studio in Tribeca. I think it's real close by.
Nice.
We should go visit him. One of the things he's doing is this sculpture with they're like corals that he's scanned, 3D scanned these corals, and then he's built these like giant. He's in the process of building this like forest of giant corals that you could walk amongst them.
Interesting.
And anyway, I'll ask him.
I'm actually touching that.
You would love that.
I would love to meet him, and I'm interested also in doing some things. I'm making some forms that could interface with coral reefs too.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'm interested in art as a form of communication. I think with stuff happening around in AI with content, and I think there's also opportunity to almost reimagine what is news,
Okay.
how to experience news,
Yeah,
how to
right.
experience information and data. And I've been thinking a lot about if I could create a place where one could go to feel a sense of presence, like a temple, but also to absorb information in a way that doesn't shut one down.
Like a data-driven temple.
Yeah, and there's so many like cliches around that, and there's so many ways it can be done.
Yeah.
But I have like hooks into something like that, which is also a place-based thing,
Yeah.
an experience, but definitely like getting us out of our phones and into the world and
Yeah.
with other people in community. And yeah, let's spend more time with you. We should do a trip together.
Totally. I would love it.
Yeah.
Maybe to Saudi Arabia. Yeah, what if you could turn like I don't know, like I always imagine like having my walls covered with charts and graphs, which kind of works for me. But the artistic version of that might be like, how do you get the built environment to express data or express what's like the unseen data? I don't know. Every building could be a bar graph of something.
It could be.
Walking around
or
New
a
York.
space you go into
Yeah.
to experience
Yeah.
the building blocks of information. Funny thing is, like when I'm with someone like you, the hardest thing for Newlab for me was that I actually don't have foundational understanding of fundamental physics.
Okay.
And I've always, when I've met with a founder or a scientist, asked them, look, I need you to actually break it down for me.
Right.
And so I've learned a lot.
Yeah, but you learn more that way.
I've become a real student of these things. But still, I always feel like when I believe that you actually understand a lot more than me. You have some,
I just got a head start on some of these things.
Yeah,
Same trajectory.
but I'm interested in learning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so if there were tools out there or experiences, even like I was listening to, if you could be inside the life of a cell and you could see what's going on inside that cell and experience it visually,
Yeah.
then you would understand it better. So I do think what you're suggesting is in the realm of possibility now with the tools
for
we've
sure.
built. And
Have you seen the renderings of cells from recently? There's an entire city in there, in every cell. Like there's so much going on in a cell. People have no idea. They think, oh, it's a cell, it's got this little nucleus. You have this like elementary drawing from high school biology. No, it's insanity. Like it's like with all the things happening in a cell, it's as complex as a city. It's just astounding.
Yeah,
and there's really cool renderings now.
I'd like to
online
see
that
that.
kind of
Maybe you'll point me towards
illuminate
that.
that.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of that podcast you did with that guy who's a biologist that's experimenting with psychedelics with other biologists.
Bruce Damer.
Oh my God, that
guy.
podcast was fabulous.
You like that? I
And
know.
also it makes perfect sense to me that scientists should be embarking on some of this, and it's major unlocks are going to come.
Major unlocks are going to come
Or
that we've stalled out for our entire lifetime because we outlawed the psychedelics. And yeah, not to say people should go wild, but there's certainly potential that we haven't tapped.
You remember the physicist David Bohm?
Yeah.
So Bohm, was pretty famous among his fellow scientists for something that originally, when he started doing this, was quite controversial because he meditated a lot.
Oh, okay.
He also observed that scientists have a really hard time listening to one another. Like once someone's talking to them, they conceive of an idea and they're really spinning their idea in their head, waiting for the person speaking to stop speaking. And we all experience that.
Right.
But scientists maybe more. And so Bohm challenged his fellow scientists in the Amherst group of colleges, listen, you're actually not hearing each other, therefore you're stalling the potentiality of actually hearing one another.
Wow.
Because we can make discoveries together. And so he created this practice of listening, of teaching people how to suspend their thoughts and hear one another.
Yeah.
And it became a kind of a cult following, this kind of thing, where people wanted to come to these workshops with him. And if you look at the people that went, you can actually correlate it to a bunch of science that blossomed and flowered out of those workshops from among the scientists that were.
I've never heard about this before, but my bet is that the actual problem is that these scientists, when you're in the room having a conversation with somebody who's an expert in the same thing as you. You think you know everything they know, and you're just waiting for them to come up with something you don't know. So, I went to the Yankees game the other day. I haven't watched a baseball game since like the early 80s. But I realized it's not just me. Everybody is just talking to their friends, hanging out, looking on their phone, drinking beer, waiting until they hear a cheer. And then they're like, oh, what did I just miss? And then they watch a replay. Nobody's actually really watching the game other than like the Moneyball guys in the front row. And that's what's going on is we've siloed scientists into these echo chambers. And so there's nothing to listen to if you're talking to another scientist in the same, who's an expert in the same thing as you. Most of the time, they're just telling you shit you already know. So what I'm guessing happened with Bohm and the thing you described is he attracted scientists, but they were actually from different disciplines. And the reason that they had some flourishing out of that is because it cross-pollinated people who are not experts in the same thing. If you're hanging out with somebody who's not an expert in the same thing as you, but you can respect their knowledge, then you listen, because you might learn. Everything they say might be, if I'm hanging out with a psychologist, I don't fucking know anything about it. Everything they say is interesting to me, so I pay attention. So I think there's more dynamics than maybe meet the surface there that I don't know if you can attribute it all to meditation or whatever, but that's the trick. I cheat by, even with the podcast, talking to people who are experts in things I don't know anything about. I get asked dumb questions. I'm learning. I'm totally engaged.
I think that's probably true, but I do think there's something to, I was, spinning off of the psychedelic conversation because I think
it could open
cultivating a sense of presence to be available
to
what someone's saying is, I think, in the same realm. It's how information is received can be, you and I could, it's like just communication is so hard for people sometimes. And it can be the difference between a major breakthrough or not, just two people talking.
Questions for me?
I'd love to know. I'd love to know what your most exciting project you're working on.
Oh, man.
I know that's a hard one because you're married to a bunch of.
Like usually the answer is like whatever we're about to do next. I don't know. I'm really excited right now. I'm just getting this like of breakthroughs that I get so turned on by. But the one I'm most excited about this week, because we got to announce it about a week or so ago, is there's a physicist in Berkeley who Stephen Wolfram introduced me to, but a lot of people know him. His name's Rich Muller, and Rich had a couple of Nobel Prizes come out of his work, and a lot of folks learned what they know about physics from Rich. Anyway, Rich figured out how to design a new nuclear reactor design. This reactor will fit in a manhole, and they bury it a mile deep in a borehole. And so it's unquestionably safe. It's buried under 10 billion tons of rock. Nothing can go wrong, but if it did, there'd be no radioactivity at the surface. The cool part about it, that's all cool, but what's even cooler is that he managed to do it using existing reactor technology, even existing fuel assemblies. So that's important because the only kind of reactor you can get approved in the US is existing reactor tech. You can't do any advanced reactor technology.
And what's the feedstock of the reactor?
You use uranium fuel rods that are assembled. So there's a kind of standard for fuel assemblies that are used in today's reactors, and they're used by the Navy reactors, they're used by the civilian reactors, and they can use that same fuel assembly, but they just take 4 of them, put them together, and then they go in this reactor that goes down the borehole.
How far is the borehole down?
1 mile deep.
So 1 mile deep.
So it's a mile from anyone.
Yeah.
There's nothing but rock between you and this reactor. Got a column of water.
So it's underneath a column of water?
Yeah, because today's reactors are what are called pressurized water reactors or light water reactors. There's water that's contained in a high pressure vessel so that the reactor, right? Because you need that cooling, that's how you extract heat, but it's also how you keep the rods from overheating and melting down. And you need enough pressure that the water keeps going, right? In this design, at a mile deep, the pressure from the column of water is the same amount as the pressure required in a conventional reactor. So they get the pressure for free.
Pressure's just gravity.
Yeah, just gravity. And normally we have to actually pressurize it with pumps and stuff. Here, it's just gravity. So the thing is extraordinarily simple.
And then you have cables coming up with power or something.
You have hot steam coming up, and then you have hot water that goes.
So it's just constant
that
pressure.
comes up, and then that runs a turbine, which runs a generator and makes electricity. So you need all that's the same as a coal plant or a natural gas plant or any other power plant, but that's on the surface. But you just have heat coming up, and you run that, and then one of these things is 15 megawatts. That's enough for a small town or a data center or whatever. And you could literally put one under this building.
So if I find you a decommissioned oil well in Saudi Arabia, do you want to pilot that there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, these guys are taking orders. Because the thing is, they should be able to get it approved in just a couple of years. And then the cool thing is this reactor is the size of a Toyota. We can build them in a factory like Toyotas, make thousands of them, ship them around the world. We can get the oil industry drilling wells to stick them in. It's perfect.
That's huge. That's huge.
Very exciting. So between that new design, which makes nuclear reactors more practical to build than ever, Congress passing the ADVANCE Act, which is pushing the NRC to approve nuclear reactors, and they're being more and more helpful all the time. And the hyperscalers realizing, oh shit, we need nuclear reactors. I think we're at a really important turning point now where we're finally getting...
Yeah. I was just with a major developer who's building like enormous data centers in Saudi Arabia.
There you go.
So maybe we can,
Yeah.
because they're buying offsets now. They don't have any.
I
mechanism.
know. Yeah, Saudi Arabia would be amazing. It's an incredible place that's got their own sovereign perspective on making decisions about what to do. They can do nuclear reactors now. And that would be an amazing place to do
But
it.
really, there might be a mile deep well.
They probably have them already, yeah. So let us have one of those old wells you drilled.
Yeah, just open it up a bit for us or something.
Totally.
You know, and
Totally.
The main thing is they have the geological know-how.
They totally
to do it. So it's,
yes, it's perfect for Saudi Arabia. I haven't told anyone there about it yet.
Okay, that's our first project.
Yeah, let's do it.